you're a male coach, coaching girls, or even if you're a female coach, the topics of periods and body image and girls' health can feel super uncomfortable. And if you've ever thought, I don't know what to say, so I don't say anything, I don't want to say the wrong thing, or where's my place in all of this? You're not alone, but also because you signed up to Coach Girls, this is part of it. This isn't a bonus topic. This is foundational and it impacts them every single day and it impacts their performance. So as a coach, if you want to be able to coach your female athletes better, you've got to know what's going on, at least at a foundational level. So I was a health teacher for several years. So I'm just going to be breaking it down for you, what's going on, and then what you can be doing as a coach to help support them through all the phases of the menstrual cycle. And also just things for your awareness. When you start to notice like dips in energy and mood and all of this, now you have a little bit more background about what's going on. And I'm going to give you some resources on how you can help your female athletes through all of it. Now, like I said, this really does matter. This isn't just something that you can just, I'm not going to worry about it, because whether you realize it or not, it's impacting how you coach and it's impacting their performance. And in fact, in 2019, the US women's soccer team actually decided to go all in on tracking their cycles and adjusting their training based on what phase of their cycle they were in, which is amazing. Obviously, there's a lot more resources that go into that. And you as a coach are not going to be able to, change your training cycle based on where athletes are at in their menstrual cycle. I get that. But because they were able to do that, they actually saw an increase in performance, reduction in injury. Athletes reported a better overall sense of strength and being able to perform better. So it really does matter, this awareness around, especially for athletes, when they know what phase of their cycle they're in and they can fuel better and they can prioritize recovery better as well. So like I said, you're not going to be able to adjust your training or anything like that. They've got to go show up and they got to do what they're going to do. But it's important as a coach to know like what's going on. So I'm going to break it down for you at a high school health level. Okay. High school health, meaning like this is what I taught my all of my high schoolers about the menstrual cycle. And it's really eye-opening because I actually didn't know any of this stuff until I was in my 30s, which is not good. Okay. And so I love to educate my athletes just like I would educate my high schoolers on what's going on. Because when I learned about this, I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. It makes so much sense like why I was feeling like I couldn't recover fully during certain parts of the month. And when I would come into practice feeling a little bit like lethargic, connecting the dots of like, oh, this is kind of what was going on. And just that knowledge allows athletes to take a little bit more ownership of their health, their recovery, their fueling, because we're talking basics here, like the basics around how to fuel and making sure that they're prioritizing recovery, especially during certain times of their month, can help them minimize symptoms that come with different parts of the menstrual cycle and also perform better and just have an understanding of what's going on so they don't go into that spiral of like, dang, I just really suck and all of this. It could be as simple as, well, I'm on day one of my cycle and during that time, I'm going to have a lower performance. So just that knowledge is really, really important. And I actually do suggest if you're not going to be providing resources, that you do partner with somebody who can talk a little bit about this or even show them this video. Okay. So let's break it down. The cycle that a female athlete experiences or a female experiences is typically between 28 and 35 days. That's considered normal. Now, we're not going to go into all of these, if your athletes are experiencing abnormal cycles or missing periods, like that's a big concern when it comes to female athletes, but that's obviously not your realm. And you don't need to be a doctor or anything like this, like none of that. If you're hearing stuff like this, then obviously refer them to their doctor, tell their parents, all that. Like you're not there diving in and giving any diagnostics or anything like that. But if you do hear of like, hey, somebody is missing their period, like that's a huge red flag. And it happens a lot with female athletes. It happened with me. And that can lead to really detrimental long-term impacts. And a lot of times athletes don't realize that. They're like, oh, sweet, no period. But it's a big problem if your athletes are missing their period. So I just say that as a kind of a tangent to like make sure that if you do hear that you refer them to like tell their parents to get that checked out. Okay. A lot of times it's an issue of underfueling and overperforming, as happens with a lot of athletes. Okay, but in the first part of the cycle starts with day one, typically last day 4 to 5 days, and this is the menstrual phase. So there's 4 phases to the cycle. In the menstrual phase, this is where athletes, females and athletes bleed, and this typically, like I said, lasts 4 to 5 days. And during this time, her estrogen and all of her hormones are at their lowest. Okay. So her body is shedding her uterine lining, which can often cause like fatigue, cramps, lower energy. Okay. So some athletes have more symptoms than others during this time. Now, she might be feeling like it affects her emotionally. So she might be feeling a little more withdrawn, maybe a little bit lower motivation, easily overwhelmed. I can tell actually, just being like a female myself, I can tell kind of when my athletes are experiencing this, because when they come in, they're like a normally like extroverted athlete might be a little bit more introverted. Okay. Now, training during this phase is actually like, as a coach, like you're not going to adjust your training based on where they're at in their phase. Okay. If you were, then during this phase, it would be a lower intensity. Okay. Focusing more on like flexibility, technique, things like that. But what you can tell them is just like, during that, you might need just to take a little bit more recovery, like take care of yourself, like take more time after to stretch, maybe take a bath with Epsom salts tonight. Like you need to focus more on your recovery. You definitely need to prioritize sleep during all phases of the cycle, but especially during the menstrual phase. So honestly, it's foundational stuff. It's stuff that like all athletes should be doing all the time, but like especially during the menstrual phase, like more sleep, making sure that we're prioritizing recovery, like that is really important. Okay. She's bleeding. So prioritizing also nutritionally iron rich foods, spinach, red meat, lentils, warm, comforting meals. Okay. Like all of that is really good. But again, this is foundational stuff. Like athletes should be doing this. We find that athletes who are skipping meals and not eating nutrient dense meals, like their period symptoms become a lot more intense and harder to deal with. So if she is doing this throughout her whole cycle, meaning like she is prioritizing highly nutrient dense foods and she's eating enough and eating often, then the symptoms that come when the period happens they're typically a little bit less, unless there's some underlying things going on. Okay. So just be aware during the menstrual phase. Don't assume low energy equals low effort. Give her space to adjust. It's during this phase also that I'm like, okay, you got to give what you have. And obviously, like a whole thing around this is let's talk about periods in a lot better, more empowering way. Okay. Talk about the menstrual cycle, because there are like, I'm going to go through all the phases and there are just like amazing things that happen during different parts. And so when we just are like, oh, it's a thing that like girls have to deal with and it's going to lower your performance and increase your injury risk. Like, no, we don't actually have to view it like that. So during this phase, it's an amazing phase where athletes are going like like I said, a little bit more introverted, a little bit more like looking inward. It's a good time for reflection on their performance and all of that. And so we can actually utilize the hormonal shifts to their advantage as an athlete. So let's not talk about periods in this like really negative light, that it's just this like plague that happens, because it's not. So empowering athletes also to take control and ownership of where they are in their cycle. I suggest that they use some sort of cycle tracker. So there's a lot of amazing apps out there that they can use to track their cycle, just so they know where they're at and they can know how long their cycle is, and they can know if they're missing their period or not, or like if they're coming up on their period, so they can know what to expect. So that is just another level of empowerment. So it's not like, a big surprise when it happens, and they can know what to expect. Okay. So that was the menstrual phase, the first 1 to 4 days, 1 to 5 days. Follicular phase is between like 6 to 14 days. This is actually when estrogen rises. It comes with more energy, more mental clarity, a lot more motivation. After an athlete's period stops, we're at the conclusion of the menstrual phase. The follicular phase is often a really fun, like, if you like compare it to a season, menstrual phase is kind of like winter, and then follicular is like spring. So she's like coming alive again. We can do a lot more high intensity workouts, strength gains, new skill acquisition is really great here. I will say again, with the menstrual phase, like all of the hormones are at their lowest. And so that's actually where she can get a lot of strength gains. Like, so just kind of a side note there, I get my PRs typically when I'm in the menstrual phase. But follicular phase is really fun because it's just like, she can go harder. She's feeling good. She's got a lot of energy. She can set a lot of great goals. She's got a confidence boost. It's just like that spring feeling of like, hey, I'm coming out of my shell again. As far as fueling goes, like high carb tolerance, like balanced meals, I would say just like overall, like it's just so important that she's eating balanced meals, nutrient dense, fruits, complex carbs like oats, quinoa, grains, like all of that is just going to serve her well in this phase, but also through all the phases. Okay. Phase 3, ovulation. Ovulation happens around day 14 for most females. This is when estrogen peaks. Confidence is at its highest. Her strength and power output are optimal. She is social. She's competitive. She's energized. She is feeling good. Okay. Like around ovulation is like, it's like, kind of like the main event of the cycle. And it's a good feeling. Okay. And this is why it's like really cool when athletes track their cycle, because they can tell when they're ovulating. They can see, and there's a lot of like physical signs that come with ovulation too, but they're like, all right, here we go. Like this is going to be a good time for me to really like get some PRs or just perform really well. Obviously athletes can perform well, female athletes can perform well during any part of their cycle, but it's just another added boost during ovulation. During this phase, fueling, like always, those building blocks of nutrient-dense foods, fueling often is really good, but this is where like berries, greens, like more fresh fruit. If you think of the seasons again, the ovulation phase is like summer. So she's got healthy fats, like things are looking good. The last phase is the luteal phase. So this is like after ovulation until her next cycle starts. This is when progesterone rises, her body temperature increases, and PMS symptoms might show up towards the end of her luteal phase. In this phase, kind of as preparing for the uterine lining to shed again, she will be a little bit more moody, maybe a little bit more irritable as her period approaches. This is really where we want to prioritize like healthy fats and a lot of protein. Also a lot of protein during her menstrual phase. I think I already said that, but just for that iron as well. And protein, there's like some dips that happen in protein during your menstrual phase, but also complex carbs like sweet potatoes, brown rice, all of those things. It's also during the luteal phase that she needs to prioritize rest and sleep and just make sure that she is again prioritizing a little bit more recovery, especially towards the end of her luteal phase. That's like as she's approaching her period. Now, awareness for the coach, like she might be a little more emotional during this time. The PMS symptoms might be a little bit more present. And again, that's just for your awareness. Okay. It's not for like making excuses. It's just so you can coach her a little bit smarter, knowing. And obviously you're not going to ask as a coach, like we'll talk about boundaries in a second. Don't ask what phase are you in? Are you about to start your period? That's a big no-no. Don't do that. Okay. Give them the resources and just say overall, like, hey, you have this amazing thing that happens on a 28-day cycle, 28 to 35-day cycle, where you get to experience different hormonal shifts. And this can work to your benefit. Again, how you talk about it matters. And this can work to your benefit as long as you are prioritizing nutrient-dense foods and recovery. And it's just important that you know where you're at in your cycle so that you can be aware of what's going on in your body. Okay. So yeah, don't be like, are you about to start your period? Or, oh, here we go, it's that time of the month. Like, no. Okay. You are not talking about it that way. We're talking about it in a way that empowers athletes so that they know what's going on in their body and that they can take ownership of their nutrition, their recovery, their sleep, all of those things. Okay. So that is an overview. If you've never learned the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, that was just like scratching the surface. A lot goes on during that phase, or during those 4 phases. But that for me, when I learned about this, it was super empowering. And I know that it is for other female athletes when they learn about it, when I tell them about like, hey, here's what's happening during different times of the month. They won't know unless they track their cycle though. So like, that's why I encourage athletes to have a cycle tracker so that they can see like, oh, here's when my energy is rising. Here's when, I'm feeling a little bit more introverted and they can, connect those dots for themselves. And also so that, I think I said this earlier, when she's in the later part of her luteal phase and into her menstrual phase, and she is maybe starting to feel a little bit more emotional or a little more critical of herself, that she doesn't go into those negative spirals. Now, that's going to happen overall. I talk to a lot of male coaches. We have, a lot of our audience are male coaches because they're like, how do I coach the emotional side of the game? Or like, there's so many other things that are going on, with girl athletes that I don't feel like equipped to know how to handle. Well, one part of it is helping her with the mental side of the game. And so we also, in addition to like empowering athletes with knowledge of what's going on during their menstrual cycle, also like equipping them with the mental training skills that they need so that when they are in those times where it's like they're a little bit more critical of themselves, that they do have self-talk strategies to help with that. So that they are taking time to visualize and do some breath work like 5 minutes before practice. That really helps with that mental clarity and that mental space, especially during, luteal and menstrual phase. So if you want to learn the simple mental training tools that I give my athletes, head to our free training. It's at coachbretraining.com. This is good for all coaches, for, whether you're coaching girls or coaching boys, like giving kids these foundational mental training skills so that they can navigate the ups and the downs of whatever's going on in their life, including the changes that happen in the menstrual cycle. I mean, really, that is priceless. It's going to help you as a coach to coach the emotional side of the game less because they have the skills. So coachfreetraining.com is where you can go to check that out, and get those free tools that you can be applying to your team. Okay, kind of wrapping up, just some low-hanging fruit that you can be doing. First of all, I've said this a few times, be very aware of how you're talking about the menstrual cycle. It needs to be in a way that's empowering for athletes, not something that's like, oh, this time in the month. Please don't ever say something like that, okay? Partner with a female coach, trainer, or parent who can help fill in the gaps if you want. You can also just share them this video so that they have some awareness of what's going on during their cycle. If you don't feel comfortable, talking about it, but, making sure that you are controlling what you can control, and athletes can control what they can control. They can't control that they get a period, but they can control how they're eating, how they're sleeping, how they're recovering, all of that. The other thing is this is so practical, but make sure that there are female hygiene products in your med kit. Athletes shouldn't have to worry. And sometimes it is a surprise when the period comes, and because maybe they're not tracking and or they're missing a period and then it comes back. They shouldn't be whispering around trying to figure out missing warm-ups because they don't have a period or they don't have a tampon or something like that. Make sure that your med kit is stocked with those things so that they don't even have to worry about it. Okay. That's simple low-hanging fruit so that it doesn't become a hindrance because they don't have access to feminine hygiene products. All right. I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments, male coaches or even female coaches. This can be uncomfortable, but any other resources that I can provide or questions that I can answer, drop those below. But I want you to feel empowered to empower your athletes with the knowledge that they have of what's going on in their bodies during different parts of their cycle, because it really is a tool that they can use in their athletic performance. It really changed my performance. It changed how I looked at my body and just anticipating things that happen during the different parts of my cycle. So I know that it's going to be empowering for your athletes, but you have to give them the tools and the resources to be able to do that. All right, coaches, I'm Coach Bre, the host of the Coach Bre podcast, and I'll see you in the next episode.